So I worked at Dior in Paris as a product manager, and I got the job even though I had almost no experience and definitely wasn't the most qualified. A lot of people think Dior only hire when you have, the perfect CV or tons of experience in the industry, but that's not true. So in this video, I'll break down the 3 key things I did that have helped me stand out from the thousands of applicants that apply each day, and how you can use them too to land your next job and maybe, even at Dior. So first point, if you want to work at Dior, the first thing you need to do is get super clear on what you want. You need to know your strength, your long-term vision, and be super specific on what role you want, a role that really fits into the bigger picture. Wanting to work at Dior is, not enough. You need to know what role you're applying for. You need to know what strength you bring to the table and why they should choose you over, thousands of applicants. So knowing exactly what role you want is key. And if you're not sure 100% what role you want, it's okay. Start with your long-term vision. What is your long-term vision? Where do you want to be in 10, 15, 20 years? And then reverse engineer the path from there. And then you can ask yourself, what's the role at Dior today that fits into, that journey, that bigger picture? And if you're still struggling to figure it out, find the people who have your ideal position that you want in 15, 20 years. And then you look them up on LinkedIn and you find the very first internship they did or the very first job they did, and that's the job you should apply to. So to give you a little bit of perspective, this is what I did when I applied at Dior. So I studied fashion design at IFM in Paris. So logically, I should have gone straight to the design studio, work with the designers. It's what I was trained for, it's what I loved. But I chose something else. I applied for the product manager role. Why? Because more than just design, I wanted to learn the ins and outs of the business, of the actual business. I really wanted to understand how this business really worked from the inside. Not just the creative side, but the business in itself, the process, the entire ecosystem behind every collection, behind the company. I really wanted to understand how each department worked together, from the design team, marketing team, merchandising team, development team, so the suppliers, how they all work together, how this ecosystem work together to form this amazing company. And I really wanted to understand what made them so successful. So basically, I wanted an overview, a 360 full overview of the company, because for my long-term vision, this made more sense, than just, diving into the design part and just understanding the design aspect of the company. But still, I couldn't help it. Design was the thing I was most passionate about, and I always found a way to be close to the design studio. Always finding an excuse to be with the designers, understanding their process. And really quick story, I remember a moment before the last show when one of the designers got sick and couldn't attend the showroom to prepare the show. The showroom is where all the designers and the creative director finalize the show. So they style the whole collection, they prepare everything for the show. And I remember overhearing the conversation that, one of the designers got sick and that they didn't know what to do. And, I offered my help, even though it wasn't my position and I wasn't even supposed to be there. But I was so passionate about the creative process that I didn't blink twice. It was the perfect opportunity. And I remember afterwards telling the other interns about it. And I remember they looked on their face like I was crazy when I told them this. First, they thought I was crazy because, it wasn't my job. Second, they thought I was crazy because I was working on the weekends in the showroom. And third, they thought I was crazy because I wasn't getting paid for it. And I remember laughing when they said all of this because, for me, it was super clear why I was there. I was there to learn. That's it. So I'm editing the video now, and I just wanted to include that really small story because I think it's super important that it needs to make sense for you. What you do need to make sense for your long-term vision, for your long-term play. And people won't understand it, and they'll think you're crazy. But if it makes sense for you, go for it. Just go for it. People didn't understand why I was doing what I was doing, even if it wasn't my job. But for me, it made total sense, and I learned way more than I thought I was going to. So yeah, I just wanted to include that story. Anyway, so here's the takeaway from this first point. 1, be clear about what role you want. If you are unsure about the role you want, think long-term and reverse engineer. And if you still hesitate, study the people who are in the positions you want in 15 years and look at their first job, their first internship, and pick that one. So don't just apply to Dior to work at Dior because you love Dior. Apply with direction. So the second point you need to understand is this. Don't apply passively. Directly message the hiring manager. So when I first applied to Dior, I applied through their career website, like everyone else, and I never heard back from them. When you think about it, HR, human resources receive thousands of applications per day. And even though they try to match the best profiles to the roles, they're not the one who lead the team you actually want to work for. To choose candidates, they follow internal guidelines. So filter based on basic criteria. And only later do the hiring managers see this, shortlist. So there's this tiny little chance that you actually stand out when you apply, only through the career website. And that's really why you need to go the extra mile and do things differently. And that's what I did. I found the hiring manager that hired for my position, the role I wanted. I found their email and I sent that person a really personalized email. And by the way, you can subscribe to my email list in the first link in the description. There I dive deeper into topics than I do here on YouTube. I share tips, lessons, insights, related to fashion, business, or life in general. So go subscribe. So first, I identified the exact team and role I wanted. Then I found the hiring manager's email and sent that person a really personalized email. Here's the framework I used in the email. So first I told them why I was interested to work at Dior. Then why I was drawn, attracted to their team. What I admired about the work they've done. And then I shared how my current and past experience really aligned with theirs. And I really focused on the actual value I could bring them. And here the key thing to remember is that I didn't ask for the job. I showed interest and I made it super easy for them to see that, I was serious, that I had done my research, and that I was, extra motivated. And if you cannot find the exact hiring manager who is hiring for the role you want, it's okay. Just message someone from their team, and they'll often, redirect your message to the right person. But before you message anyone, do the work, do your research, research the department, know what they're working on, and really get clear on how you could, actually contribute. And the people who really get the attentions, are those who, come prepared, the ones who already understand what the team actually needs and can speak to it. So instead of saying, I love Dior, I want to work there, you can say something like, hi, name, so here their first name, my name is your name, and I've been closely following Dior recent FW24 show, and it genuinely inspired a few ideas I'd love to share with your team. I'm currently looking for an internship in the marketing or whatever product management department, and your work really stood out to me. I admire the way your team translated storytelling into strategy, especially through, and then you insert whatever you want. And here, really personalize something. I'd love to better understand what you typically look for in strong candidates and how I can bring value to your team during this upcoming season. Thank you for your time and congrats again on the incredible recent campaigns. But that's just one example, but you could personalize it in 100 different ways. And the one thing that actually matters is how can you bring value to their team? That's it. Not what you want from them, but what you can bring them. And that's really what differentiates you. So now the last point, and this is the easiest way you can get hired, which is to act a part of the team before you are actually on it. So what I mean by that is that most people, send their CV, they say that they're passionate about the brand, passionate about fashion, and they just hope for a reply. But that's not what actually gets you noticed. The people who stand out and get hired are the ones who actually bring value. That's it. They don't ask to be picked, they show up like they are already a part of the team. Instead of waiting, create something. You can give value in a lot of different ways. For example, you could share ideas inspired by, their previous collection. You could make a short video analyzing one of their shows. You could send them collage, drawings, mood boards. But here, really important, tailor what you do, what you send them, the value you send them, tailor it to the actual department you are applying for. Don't send drawings to the marketing team or the merchandising team. And this one piece of value, this one piece of content says way more than 1,000 I really want this job emails ever could. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't say I love Dior. I really showed how my background really made me the right fit and how I could use that background in the role. As a product manager, your role is really to help develop the collection. Working across departments from design, marketing team, suppliers, operations, basically following the entire development cycle. So I really highlighted how my experiences really supported that. I had studied fashion design at IFM, so I understood how products were made. And I was also in my final year of my business degree, so I had a strong foundation in product management, teamwork, strategy, operations. And I also brought up my international background and one previous internship that I did that, was kind of similar. It's a smaller scale, but similar. And then I went further. I shared a few ideas I had on how to make the development process more fluid. So I had done my research on how Dior product management team worked. And I really understood what they actually needed. And I showed up at that person who understood that and who had ideas on it and who could, help them, and sharing thoughts and ideas on how I could contribute. And that's really what made the difference. I wasn't just applying, I was already thinking like the person on the team, like one of them, like one of the person on the team. So an example here, if you're applying for a role, let's say in marketing, don't just say something like, I love the marketing team at Dior and what you guys do. Don't say this. Instead, say this. I love the storytelling behind the cruise show in Mexico. Here's how I'll adapt it into a TikTok campaign series designed to resonate with Gen Z audiences. Then you attach whatever you did to your message. Even one sentence like that, something specific, thoughtful, and brand relevant, puts you in a completely different category from everyone else. So you really need to understand the team you're trying to join and show up like you are the missing piece of that team. So forget about having the perfect resume, the perfect past experiences, and being scared to apply. Adding value is far more powerful than, having a perfect resume. Because think about it, how many people apply to Dior every day? Thousands. So why would anyone remember you unless you give them a reason to? So go the extra mile, offer value before asking for anything else. And that's really what makes you unforgettable. So to wrap it up, landing your job at Dior isn't about having the perfect resume or checking all the boxes about on the job description. It's about clarity, initiative, and value. So get crystal clear on what you want and how it fits into your long-term vision. And don't just send your application and hope for the best. Take the extra step to connect directly with the team. Show you understand their needs and prove you're serious. And most importantly, don't wait to be hired to add value to. Give them value. Show up like you are already part of the team. So if you do these 3 things, apply with a plan, apply actively, and add value before you are even on the team, you'll stand out no matter how competitive that job is. So remember, it's not about luck, it's about strategy and action. So take these steps, make them your own, and get your job at Dior. And if you want more tips, lessons, and insights, whether it's on fashion, business, or life in general, join my email list. Click the first link in the description to subscribe, and you'll get content way deeper than here on YouTube. So thanks for watching, and good luck.